Hello, folks. How are you? Oh, I'm taking the messy bun to the extreme today. A couple minutes late just because I had a choking fit right before I started. It happens. But I'm here now, and so are you. So welcome. This is Cheryl Larkison, your host on the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sewalong for 2024. It is the Rainbow Edition. Still playing around with these pastels on week 35, 36, 37, 30. No, 35, 36, 37. Week 38. Didn't sound right. Didn't sound right. Still doesn't sound right. Someone correct me because I'm always wrong on this stuff. But anyways, we're here for week 30 something. God, do you remember being 38? I do. I just had a baby, actually. Now that I think about it, 38. No. My son was 1. Anyways, digressions today. Just gonna be that kind of a day. I guess I'm in a bit of a silly mood. We'll go with that, right? Yeah, so hi. Still coming to you from the basement. It is week 38. Okay, thank you for clarifying. Yep, still coming to you from the basement. Still here. All the repairs have been made in my studio, and other than the electrical in the floor, which we're waiting on pieces for that, but I can move it without that. My space is ready to go. We could be in there, but we don't have occupancy because we're missing some extra railings for the mezzanine. I don't know. I don't even ask anymore, frankly. I just don't. So yeah, I'm still here, but that's okay. I got my boy. I don't know if I've told you, he's doing online school in the mornings, and then he's been going to school in the afternoons, except for today. Today, he's not feeling 100%. And actually, he's not even feeling like 50%. Normally, even if he's just a little bit tired, he still goes, but today was not that day. So he is in the next room trying to have a little lay down. And yeah, because he's finished school. I was helping him with math this morning. Yeah, and we're here to sew. And I need to play as much as you probably do. So let's get to it. I don't have a finished block to show you because the aforementioned math help that I was doing, but that's fine. And there's a lot of sewing in today's block. It will depend on you and what you do with it per se, but I got my block sort of 75% of the way there, and I want to show you how to do the rest of it. So we'll do that together. What are we doing today? We are making little pluses, a whole bunch of pluses. You may have seen a lot of different versions of these around. It's a pretty common improv technique. I don't know why I haven't really done it for this stuff yet, but I thought it would be good. So I literally went into my bin of scraps for this project, grabbed a handful, and that's what I'm using to make these. So they're all going to be different sizes, and we want that. We want that kind of variation. We're going to have to spend a little bit of time figuring out how to get it all together. We're going to be cutting off stuff we already sewed, all normal, all fine with all of that. So I'm going to show you how to make the plus blocks kind of 2 ways. There's sort of 2 ways to approach it. They're almost identical. But just depending on what you have for your scraps will determine how you kind of get into each block. And I've done both for this entire thing because that's how my scraps came to me. I tend to like to use my scraps as they come, as opposed to forcing them to be something they're not. Kind of like parenting. But I won't get into that. So let's head over here to the table. We will flip you around so you can say hello to the ladies. And we will come down and we will say hello to the sunbeam. It's winter, so there's a sunbeam. That's just how it goes. It's just how it goes. And we'll go like that. I had put my, that's why it's not going. I put my tripod away, so the settings are a little kind of off. There we go. That's a little bit better. So you can see I've made a few already. Got 5 here. And then I'm going to make a few more over here. So what did I mean by there's kind of 2 ways to do it? Well, we can start, I've just got these all sort of laid out so I have my colors and I know what colors I'm going to use. You can start out with sort of a rough square. I mentioned I was using scraps. I'm just going to use it as it's come to me as opposed to kind of squaring this off in any way, shape, or form before I sew. So you can use a square that we then cut and put our pieces in, or maybe it's going to be like this, where you just have 2 sort of rectangles that if they were together could be a square, but they're not. So you may have already cut that apart, or you, excuse me, you can cut it apart first, or from your scrap pile, you just grabbed 2 strips to do it. So somebody asked and they said they just tuned in and said it was winter. I thought you were in Canada. I am in Canada. We're fall. It is like we're coming into peak color season. I just referred to the winter sun, meaning it's lower, so much lower in the sky. We're really noticing that difference. Like last night we were sitting down to watch a hockey game. Yes, terribly winter of us as well. It's preseason hockey and our nephew was playing. So we sat down to watch hockey and I'm like, oh, it's 8 o'clock and it's pitch dark already. Like that to me, that's what I mean by winter sun. So anyways, okay. So we're going to do these. I'm going to make these 2. I have a 3rd one here. Maybe I'll just make it as well. So that one is that standard piece. So these 2 we're going to cut. This one's already cut. That's really the only difference. I just don't want you to have to go through and go, oh, I can only use squares or rectangles. I can't use the strips that I have. You can absolutely use the strips you have. These ones did not come together at all. They were just random scraps that I cut into kind of roughly rectangular shapes. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to sew that first bit in there. Now, how big of a piece you sew, where exactly you make the cut, all of that is entirely up to you, right? So you can see here I've got a fairly wide bit in here. This one's a fairly skinny bit. This one here, I've got both in there. Play around, have some variety, see what you like. But I'm going to just get these all ready and then I'm going to chain piece them. It just makes life a little bit easier as we go. I'm not going to move the camera. You don't need to see the sewing. It is your standard 1/4 inch seam allowance, or at least consistent seam allowance for your sewing. And I'll go through. And what I do, just for efficiency's sake, is I will sew both sides at the same time. So I've sewn the one side. I'm just going to open that up. I'm not even going to bother finger pressing, but I am just going to grab the other one, line it up, and sew down that seam. Same with on my green one here. And then, because I was chain piecing and I had that one in the machine, I'm going to grab that last one and go there. Okay, so once I have all 3 of those sewn, then I'm going to press them. I am pressing all of mine towards the center plus, right? I'm not pressing towards the background. It doesn't really matter. The only caution I would give you is if you're pressing towards the center, as you can see me doing here, if it's a really, really skinny strip, you run the risk of your seam allowances overlapping, right? Mine are touching and just overlapping in a couple of spots here. So you just want to pay attention to that. It's not a bad thing, but it is adding bulk. And you want to press carefully. That's all. There we go. Little green one. The green and blue aren't super high contrast, but that's good. Because it's nice to have that variety. Now, if you go, like I'm looking at this going, wow, that pink bit in the center is quite large. If you change your mind and say, I don't want that, it's too big, what are you going to do? Are you going to get your seam ripper out? No. You're just going to go here and you're going to cut right along that seam. Give yourself a fresh cut. Heck, I would even be lazier and just give myself a fresh cut. Flip this yellow around and sew it back on the other way. Say like here, so it's a skinnier strip. Save even that effort of cutting the extra seam because you're going to square up the block eventually anyways. With a lot of improv work, that's exactly what we can do, is we can just cut it out as opposed to seam ripping. So now we need to give ourselves that cross seam here. I'm making pluses. You could make these on more of an angle to make more of an X. I'm just using the ruler as a straight edge, eyeballing center-ish, straight-ish. I'm not worrying about too much about whether it's, you know, bang on center or 90 degree or anything. In fact, it'll be more interesting if it's not. Then I'm going to go ahead and sew that seam. Just make sure you're paying attention to your seam allowances on the back so you don't flip them, because I did do that on one of them. Am I going to redo that? No. I'm just going to pay more attention on the following ones. That's all. So just do all of them. Again, I'm using scraps, so some of the pieces are a bit more than I need. So rather than sew them all, I'm just going to trim them off. I think I just flipped a seam allowance on that one there, but we'll find out. Okay, this time I do want to press these before I sew the second one. Yeah, I totally flipped the seam allowance there. See, I didn't even listen to myself. Is it the end of the world? No, it's not. I am going to press these first because here's what I'm going to show you. When you have a flipped seam allowance, roll with it. I just pressed the whole thing in that direction. I didn't do that here, but I will, right? Because then I don't have to worry about the bulk of that folded seam. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. There we go. Same thing on the one I just did. Again, I am pressing towards my plus sign, my little insert, just to be consistent. Okay, and last one. Now, I think when all is said and done, I'm probably going to have more than I need, but that's all right. It's better to have more than anything else. Yes, Painter Mom 63 says very little in quilting is the end of the world. That is so true. I actually wrote about that in the Quilters Playcation newsletter today. That was the theme of what I was writing about, and how embracing that improv spirit can actually help you in real life as well, right? Learning to just go, oh, well, in quilting helps you learn to go, oh, well, let's fix the problem and move forward in life. That's why I'm not going to get too fussed or upset about the studio not being ready. There was a flood. What can I do about it, right? What can I do? Okay, so one thing I just want to talk to you about before we finish this is putting these, and I want to get that out of the sunbeam, is I want to talk about putting these together. There's sort of two philosophies here. There are people who are going to get very upset if that doesn't line up perfectly, right? If this isn't lining up once I sew this final seam in. See, it's not perfect. Do I care? No. But there are some people that would bother them. Here's your little tip. I want you to get a needle, and you want to get a needle like this. Something that has a tiny head on it. So a little applique needle, a dressmaker's needle, something like that. And you're going to eyeball where this might be. So I'm eyeballing there. I'm going to flip it over as if I was going to the sewing machine to sew this, except I'm not going to sew it. I'm going to take that pin and I'm going to put it on the 1/4 inch line. You could draw the line, you can eyeball that line. It's up to you. And that's going to mimic it. Oh, it's sewn now. So if I flip it, am I in line? Actually, I did pretty good on the first try. If you didn't, you just take the pin out and adjust this left or right, repin it, see if you're close. Like I said, I don't care that much. This is kind of fun improv work where if it's a little bit out, it's not going to fuss too much. Right? And if you're someone who would prefer it to be matchy and you're trying to break free from that a little bit, this is a great way to practice. Okay, so we have our 3 here. I'm going to go ahead and we'll press those, and then we'll talk about getting our block together, because that's important too, right? So there we go on that first one. Again, I'm pressing towards my plus sign in the middle. But quickly we got 3 blocks. This is one of those blocks that can be very kind of addictive and fun to make, right? Because they're just so simple, but with a really strong impact, and especially depending on how you may choose your fabrics, you can have a lot of fun with these. So I'm going to go here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to lay it out on my pressing mat to avoid that sunbeam. So I have all of these blocks. Now I would say I kind of have 3 bigger ones and then some smaller ones that can be filler. And I'm just going to play around with how they might come together. I'm going to keep a ruler or one of my other blocks close by so I can get an idea on size. There, so, you know, if I sew those together, well, that's giving me, you know, even with seam allowance, 12 inches when I need 10.5 for these. So it's a good way to kind of play around, see what you are going to get. Right. I can line things up that are similar sizes. And I'm looking at this and thinking, geez, am I going to have, how much am I going to have here? I'm going to have a lot, but we're not at that size yet. So could I turn it this way? Could I put a different block over here, right? If I sew that together with seam allowances, I'm actually going to probably be a little bit short, so that's not a solution. We'll go with something a little bit bigger over here. So, you know, now I've got all this pink together, and do I want all that pink together? So just fuss around with it and get it to a place that you like, right? In my case, you know, maybe it's going to be like that. those three. And then now I'm going to go, oh, what happens if I just sew that together and I just have that one extra? This, I'm probably going to be a little bit short sewing here. So now I've got to ask myself a question. I'm going to have more than enough height. I'm probably going to be a little bit short here. Do I want to make another plus sign that's bigger? Do I want to add something in here? Or do I, at the end of the day, just want to add a strip to one of these, right? I could add a blue strip, so then this plus sign is kind of floating in the blue, and that's probably what I'll do because that's the easiest solution. So you can always add or subtract anywhere along the way. I'm just gonna double check. Do I care that these blues are next to each other? Nope, I don't. So I'm gonna go with this. So whenever we're doing this kind of stuff, I always say you want to start with the smallest first, right? So these are our two smallest pieces. So we're going to sew these together so that I can sew these seams together. And then I'll sew this together. I might add that blue. We'll see how big this becomes, and then we'll decide from there. So in terms of sewing these together, actually just wait, just before I do that, I might swap. I want to swap that out. The little bit of purple in there instead of that blue. No, I'm going to keep the blue. Just wanted to double check, you know. Okay, so to sew these pieces together, I'm just going to put them right sides together and give myself a fresh cut. Boom. Really nice and neat. Just take that to the machine. Not worried about lining up the plus signs in the center or anything like that. Same thing with the next two, right? I want to sew this seam together, so I'm just going to lay them right sides and give that a fresh cut. And then sew that. So in this phase of making the block, we have that kind of back and forthing, right? So a little, go back to the machine, lay it out, press it, back and forth, back and forth. That's really not that big of a deal. So I will press these. Now you can press open or to one side. It really doesn't matter at this point. There we go. So now I have that and I have that. And then they're going to be a little bit, now that they're sewn together, I can see that I have, you know, kind of this gap here. And again, I'm just going to double check, you know, where am I at? Because maybe I want to add something at this point, or am I going to add it later to things? And I think I'm going to add it now. So I'm going to add a yellow strip there. Then I'm going to move this one over and add a blue strip here. Okay. Just go into my scraps. Right. I got a yellow strip. I can go ahead and add that on. I'm always wanting to keep in mind, you know, what do I have? What do I need? What's coming next with everything? Okay, so I'm going to add a blue strip there. They don't need to be huge, but I do need a little bit there. You can, of course, always add on afterwards. Just add strips around the whole thing, make the whole block bigger. Nothing wrong with that too, okay? This time you can see right? I added my yellow strip. I didn't trim this first. So just used my scissors. Sorry, I did it off camera, but I just went like that with my scissors. No big deal. Right, that didn't add a huge amount, but it'll probably be just what I need. I added a bigger scrap because that was what I had on there. Right, now I'm closer to making that whole section. So now I'm going to go ahead and sew these together. The first thing I will do, of course, is I'm going to cut those. Now in this case, I am laying them right sides together and then giving myself a fresh cut. But you could layer them right sides up and give a fresh cut that way. Nothing wrong with that. It's just about what feels comfortable and natural for you. Remember, I've always said when we do improv work, we have our own kind of way of doing things that feels comfortable for us. So I'm going to go ahead and press this before I add the next piece on. Okay, so we're going to add this piece here. Now this time I am, because you can see I kind of have an angle going on here, I'm going to use that to my advantage, right? And I'm going to cut these layered right sides up. Because why not? And then I'll sew those together. So both work, right? You can do both. Just make sure you're paying attention to your seam allowances as you go. Okay, so now I'm going to press this. We're going to see where we're at size-wise. All right. And I'm hopeful that we're still on track for that 10.5 inches tall. If we're not, I'm not going to stress. I'm just going to add a piece, right? Where am I? Oh, I am just, right? If I go to the top up here and I come here, I am right at 10.5 inches. So if you're worried, you could add more. I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to let it go. So now if I sew these two pieces together, what am I doing width-wise, right? At its widest here, let's say I have about 6.5, which means I need 6.5. I need about 5 inches on this. I have it on my orange piece, right? I have that here. I don't have it on my blue. So I'm going to add a strip of blue here before I sew it to the orange piece, just to give that to me. And I conveniently, you can see, had a scrap strip of the blue. So that is what I'm going to sew on. I'm just going to kind of roughly trim it to length. Get rid of my selvage. Now I have more than I need. You can tell that I have more than I need, but it's better to have more than to think, oh, I don't want to do that big of a piece because then I'm just going to end up trimming it off. Yeah, but what if you make it too small? Then you got to add another one. So I would rather have just a little bit bigger and go with that. Okay. So there is that. Let's press it. I have water in my iron and I can totally tell. Not that that's a great iron, but whatever. Okay, so I can play around with where this is going to go. I know that I have more than enough length with it. I'm gonna go that way, I think. And then I should have enough width. Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and put those together, cut a nice straight cut there. And I'll sew this seam and then we'll be ready to do that final seam. So you can see it really is just that puzzling together. It doesn't have to be a hard or a big deal. Just take your time with it. This is the same thing I would do if I was putting a quilt top together. That's all different improv components. I just kind of be figuring it out as I go. I'm going to press that up because there's actually less seams going in that direction. Okay. So now I'm going to join these two. I'm just going to bring you over to the cutting table though, because that's what we're going to have to do. So again, I can choose to cut on top, right? Have them right sides up, or I can flip it over and have them right sides together. But just before I sew, I just want to double check I'll be okay, right? I know that I have enough height here, just enough height. So that's going to be kind of where it ends up getting trimmed, and I will be good. Even when I sew these two together, I'm going to have enough wiggle room with my seam allowance. And I'm just, because I was thinking maybe I would put these right sides up and sew them. I want to double check that I'm actually going to have all of the bit underneath here. So I think if I just move that a little bit and go like that, right, pull away my excess, and yeah, I will be good. And I'm going to flip that over and sew them together, and then we'll square up the block finally. So lots of stops and starts, a little bit of fiddling to make sure you get up to size. But remember, you can always add pieces to get you to size, and you'll be trimming stuff off anyways. The other thing is that check as you go, right? If we were doing a whole quilt top where it didn't really matter what the size was, I wouldn't be checking for size as I went, right? I would just be doing it and it'll be what it's going to be. But in this case, because I'm aiming for a specific size, I'm working towards that. Okay, so I will have less seam allowances on this side, or you could press open. So there is, I had a little fold in that seam, so just fixing that before I square it up. That's kind of fun, hey? Great use of the scraps. I'm going to give this a little bit of good old flatter, especially because I have a dry iron today. Oh, that is one thing. I'm going to get a new iron when I go to the studio. And then leave this one at home, because we'll need one at home for clothes and stuff like that. And I got a new pressing mat for the studio. Wait till you see that. I'm so excited. I will give a full review of that when the time comes. And there's our block, right? That was sort of how we were putting it together. I'm going to go ahead and bring that over here, and I'm going to square it up to our 10.5 inches. Remember, I have just enough there and more than enough here. So let's go bottom up. I'm right-handed, so we're going right to left while I was holding my ruler nicely in place before I move all my trimmings to make sure. Now I'm going to flip this over so I can line up 10.5 inches here, 10.5 inches on the bottom, and give myself a nice fresh cut. So that used up a handful of scraps, which was always good, right? And gave us a fun, can't see it there, gave us a fun scrappy block. I think it'll be a nice addition to the quilt. So let's flip around. Oh, I didn't flip you around. Hi. Alrighty, and we'll add this. Pardon the mess. I would love to move. I'm ready to, mostly. Yep. And we'll stick our block to join the rest of the quilt. Yeah, that was a good choice. A bit different from having sort of the hard, lines like we have here. All these blocks with their lines. This one is kind of that bit of a scrappier effect. Works nicely. So that is week 38 of the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sewalong. I am your host, Cheryl Arkeson. One of these days I will not be coming to you from my basement, but for now I am. Which is all good. Remember, that was a lot of kind of puzzling together. I was trying to vocalize my thought process as I was going through it, so I hope it wasn't confusing in all of that. Sounds like we're getting great responses, that people thought it was helpful, so yay me. And I'm glad it made sense to all of you. Have fun with this block. It's just, like I said, it's kind of like candy. You just keep going and you keep doing it. There is, that perimenopausal brain. Nicholas Ball, that's it. Nicholas Ball has done quite a bit of this plus sign work as well, and did a lot of help in popularizing it a couple years back too, which was great in there. So you can also look up his stuff if the way I was explaining it maybe didn't make sense to you. But try it. Have fun with it. Use up those scraps. It made a dent. I have one little plus left. It matches what I'm wearing. Turn it into a little brooch. Yeah, have fun with it. Okay? Folks, have fun playing. That's the whole goal, is we're here to play. We're here to just roll with it, right? So take care, everybody. We will see you online. Make sure that if you post any blocks, you use the hashtag so everybody can see it. QP Adventure Sewalong, QP Adventure Sewalong 2024, if you're looking for specifically this year's, or Quilters Playcation. I will see you. You can find me online at CherylArkeson.com or QuiltersPlaycation.com, or here on Instagram and YouTube. When in doubt, just Google my name. All right, everybody, have yourself a great week. I'm going to go have a cup of tea because I got a trunk show in a couple of hours. So have a cup of tea to get me through that. And then I'll be dog walk and all the rest of it. Life. Good stuff. Okay, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.